Good morning, guys, and happy Tuesday. I'm here for a short video to explain some of the most common pet myths because I thought that would be an interesting topic. I get asked a lot by the children of my clients about why cats have 9 lives or why dogs are supposedly colorblind or things like that. So I thought I might explain some of them. The most common adage is obviously that cats have 9 lives, and we know for a fact that this isn't true, but where did it come from? There is an old, I think it's English proverb that says, a cat has 9 lives, for 3 he plays, for 3 he strays, and for the last 3 he stays. And this is basically supposed to explain why cats give the most affection when they're old and they're not strong enough to chase mice anymore. They're also fairly indestructible, according to most people, because they can survive falls from great heights. This is actually because their vertebrae are more flexible than ours. So the longer, up to a point obviously, the longer the distance that they're falling, the more time they have to organize themselves and prepare for the landing. So in the case of somebody parachuting out of a plane, the more time you have to prepare and get the wind right and the angle and everything, the more likely you are to land correctly. It's the same with cats. And I have a few clients actually that their cats were, on top of a fence and they fell off and they dislocated or injured something. But the longer falls they're actually quite good at. So they are supposed to always land on their feet, but sometimes of course they don't. Cats that stay inside all the time are not protected from disease because obviously there's mosquitoes and things get in, and there's zoonotic diseases that sometimes another pet gets and then can give it to them. Zoonotic just means it passes between people and humans. Sometimes our dog will give it to us and then we'll give it to the cat. So they're not necessarily safe just because they live indoors. Cats are actually not supposed to drink milk after they're kittens because it can give them severe diarrhea. So all the stories you hear about leaving cream and milk out for cats can actually severely mess up their digestive system. There's also a story about how pregnant women are not allowed to be near cats. That's not entirely true, unless of course they're allergic to cats. But they're not supposed to be near the litter box because of all the toxins and chemicals that are in there. So if you have a pregnant wife and you have a cat, you get to clean out the litter box for the good 9 months that she's pregnant. A purring cat is not necessarily happy. They purr for other reasons, such as they're in a lot of pain or they're about to die. Of course, don't panic every time they purr because you'll know if your pet's very sick. Another interesting thing about cats is that they are not nocturnal and they are not diurnal, meaning awake during the day. They're what's called crepuscular, meaning they're awake the most at dawn and dusk. And I have a friend that we always joke around that she's crepuscular because she sleeps in and then stays up really late. And I function like a normal human being and wake up during the day and go to sleep at night. So we always have an interesting time when she comes to visit. Okay, moving on to dogs. It is not true that only male dogs hump. Female dogs do that as well, and it can be seen as a dominating, establishing authority type of behavior, or just because they feel like it. They don't really need a reason. Dogs do not just eat grass when they're sick. Sometimes they do it because they feel like they're missing nutrients from their food. They think it tastes good, or just because they want to. They've actually done a lot of studies into why dogs eat grass. And sometimes it's just because they want to. They can be perfectly healthy and just eat grass because they feel like it. So don't panic if you see your dog eating grass. I know Kai used to eat a lot when she was on kibble because it upset her stomach. And since we switched her to raw, she eats much less grass. She used to actually eat so much that she would throw up the grass. It would just be a big ball of grass. It was pretty disgusting. If your dog is out in the car, cracking a window does not help. If it's hot outside, they can die in the car even if the window is cracked. And I talked about this a few times, once in, I think it was Beat the Heat month, and a lot of times in July or June, just because people do leave their dogs in hot cars, and I'm hoping they're going to pass the law soon that civilians are allowed to rescue the dog if you leave them in the car for too long, because they can die, even with water in there, because the temperature goes up way too high. Dogs have a cleaner mouth than humans. Yes and no. They walk closer to the ground, so they absorb more chemicals coming from the ground. They lick their genitals, and some of them drink toilet water, which is obviously not as clean as the water that we drink, hopefully. But they can have zoonotic diseases in their mouth, which is bacteria or viruses that, if they lick us, they can actually give us the disease, which is terrifying to a lot of people. But as long as you keep your pet's mouth clean, brush it once in a while, put something in their water, give them some parsley to freshen their breath, then they should be fine and you won't get anything from their kisses. They are in fact not colorblind. They can see yellow, green, and blue, but reds and purples, that end of the spectrum, not so much. A wagging tail does not necessarily mean that they're happy. They can do it because they're anxious. They can do it for a lot of other reasons, but learning something as simple as what the different type of tail wags mean. Of course, Kai doesn't have a tail, but I still know her behavior quite well. Can help you communicate and strengthen the bond with your pet. I am planning on putting together the body language workshop. I have someone helping me with the dog one, and the cat and horse one might take a little bit longer, but I will post about it in my newsletter when I decide to finish it. Aggressive breeds. There's not necessarily anything specific about these breeds. It's that they're bigger, stronger, and some of them are raised to be dog fighters or guardians of the house. Might have to try this again. Okay. Hopefully this continues from the next one, but it cut out for a bit there. There are no such thing as aggressive breeds. Some dogs are bred to be bigger, stronger, and fiercer, but some are also brought up to be guardians of the house or dog fighting dogs. And so these breeds require more experience, but necessarily if they're trained to be more aggressive, they can be, but if they're trained as a normal household dog, then typically they aren't. But this also requires the owner to understand how best to handle their behavior. Of course, positive reinforcement is usually the best way to go, and finding some equipment to help them be walked so they get more exercise, so they exhibit less destructive behaviors. But that passes for any dog. So if your dog's destroying things in your house, they probably need more exercise, or they're missing something in their diet that they think they need from, the wall or the furniture. Large dogs are not necessarily dangerous. When I worked at a doggy daycare, one of the most friendly dogs there was a big Rottweiler. There was also a half Timberwolf, half Husky. It was very, very friendly. The Great Danes were friendly. The Bernese Mountain Dogs were friendly. I would say typically the smaller dogs tend to overcompensate, so sometimes they can be a little show-offy, a little more standoffish. But again, if you know how to handle the dogs and you can interpret their behavior, then that's something that you don't really have to worry about. Dogs cannot get enough exercise from their backyard. Even if you have a quarter acre in your backyard and it's fenced and they get to run around, that's not enough exercise for them. The whole point of taking dogs for a walk is that they get out of their home environment. So the same way that if we stay in our house too long, we feel like we need to get out and get fresh air, they're the same way. So if we don't get them out for a walk, they get what I'm not calling cabin fever, but thinking of The Shining. They need to get out because they need a change in their environment. They need to smell all the smells that are happening in their neighborhood, and it gives them intellectual stimulation as well as physical stimulation. So that's always something important. You can teach an old dog new tricks. There are some videos of, I think it's a shepherd, being taught a trick that he hadn't learned before. I've seen old dogs learn all kinds of new behaviors, so I've never really believed in this one. But it's true for people too. At the barn that I ride at, one of the ladies is over 80 and she picked up horseback riding, which is, I have to say, a very muscle-intensive sport. So good on her for her sticking it through. Moving on to horses. Most of their communication is not through neighing and whinnying. It's actually through body communication. So when you see them in the herds, they typically don't make as much sound as they do in the wild, because they can communicate with body language. But because we have domesticated them and changed their routine entirely, they don't have as much freedom that they normally do, so they have to communicate because they can't always see who they want to talk to. Riding is not just sitting, because a lot of people see people horseback riding and say, oh, that's so easy. Let me tell you, it is not. I used to ride when I was younger, up till I was about 12, and then I took a really, really long break. And I picked it up again in October, and I got off the horse after about an hour ride the first time, and my legs almost buckled out from under me. Now, I'm a fairly fit person. I take care of myself, but my muscles were not used to just sitting. So horseback riding is a very muscle-intensive sport, and much respect to anyone who spends a lot of time on it, because it's a lot of work. And my muscles are getting used to it now, but if you put me on a new horse that I'm not used to riding, my muscles are sore for at least 3 days after. But it's very, very good exercise, and it is definitely worth it. Another myth is that horses only sleep standing up, which, if you've seen horses in the wild, typically they have somebody watching for predators, and then some of them sleep. Typically it's the females and the babies that sleep, and the males watch, but occasionally the mare will watch instead of the gelding. They definitely do not sleep. And especially they do give birth standing up sometimes, but again, sometimes they give birth laying on the ground in their stall. Horses do not grow new teeth. A lot of people think that they do, but actually their teeth just grow out further when they're older, which is why looking at their teeth and the coloration of their teeth is a good way to tell how old they are. The same way that the rings on a tree, if you've ever sliced a stump and looked at it, you can tell how old the tree is by how many rings it has. It's the same with horses. So that's why horse dentistry is such a big thing, because their teeth have to be constantly filed down so that they don't have a lot of pain, because their teeth are flat, not hooked like some of ours are, because they grind, and you don't want the points affecting their gums or teeth. So horse dentistry is a big thing. Again, horses are not colorblind. They can see yellow, green, and blue. It's similar to dogs and cats, where they can't see red or purple, but they can see in the warmer color spectrum. Grain-filled diets are not good for horses. And a lot of people think that they are, because this is what's advertised to horses, but they're actually supposed to eat plants and roughage, which is what they eat in the wild. And occasionally they'll eat a plant stem or leaves or things like that, and that just adds nutrients to their diet. But believe it or not, horses are not supposed to eat grain, according to the research that I did. I have been to a horse nutrition seminar, and they said very much the same thing. Horses sometimes look like they're laughing, but it's actually when they curl their lips back. It's what's called a Flehmen response, and it's when they're directing the molecules in the air towards their nose so that they can smell. So it's actually an olfactory response, meaning stimulating their smelling by pushing the molecules up into the curves of their nose so they know what's going on, basically. So a lot of times kids go, oh, look, that horse is laughing at you, and it's actually trying to smell you or the smells around you. So those are the most common pet myths. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Thanks to everyone who joined me. Not a whole lot else to say about that. A lot of times it's kids that believe the pet myths, but you'd be surprised how many adults I see that think that dogs only see in gray, or cats can actually live very, very, very long lives, which some of them can. I know some of my clients have 18-year-old cats, so it's definitely possible, but always good to keep learning. I will see you next Tuesday, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I think it's poison prevention because this month is Poison Prevention Week, and my newsletter this month is talking about food safety and home safety. So I will talk a little bit about poison there, but mostly what foods your pet can't eat, how to keep your household safe and avoid chemicals and things like that. But have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next Tuesday.